Hi, my name is Katie Gumfrey and I am presenting for Dr. Frederick Green's Business 230 class. And today I'll be speaking about drug testing. Okay. The topics I'll be covering are what drug testing is and who is allowed to test you. Is it legal? How it works? Testing for state and federal aid such as welfare. Testing in schools, both public and private, and testing of professional sports. Okay. The definition of drug testing is a technical analysis of a biological specimen to determine the presence or absence of specified drugs, most often seen in a urinalysis. Drug testing can apply within your place of work, the criminal justice system, and they use it quite frequently, school systems, both public and private, temporary assistance for needy families, which is welfare, and personal use, which is a parent testing their child, or a wife and a spouse, or something along those lines. Okay. Testing in the workplace. Everyone is subject to testing whether you're employed federally, locally, or privately. The Supreme Court ruled that drug testing does invade on individuals' privacy. It may be necessary to test an individual due to the safety and health of others. Because of this ruling, employers have the discretion to test upon their circumstances. Many employers test upon hiring and are allowed random drug tests if they suspect a person or persons of abusing a substance. Many times when random drug tests happen, the employer is looking for a positive test on one person, but instead of singling out that individual, they test a group of employees. Each state has a different set of standards of testing and privacy laws, so depending on which state you're a resident of, there may be a higher or lower standard for drug testing. And since marijuana has recently become legal in a few states, even if it is illegal federally, and it may not be legal in your workplace. Okay, the criminal justice system. There are many purposes in the criminal justice system that use drug tests for their offenders. Testing can take place as soon as the offender is taken to be booked into custody to see what, if any, drugs are in their system. At bail hearings, judges can allow drug tests to determine the outcome of bail. If the inmate tests positive, they may have negative repercussions such as higher bail, or a longer probation and parole period, or harsher release conditions such as weekly drug testing with a parole officer. During incarceration, there can be random drug tests to suspicious inmates to see if they have gained access in some way to make drugs, to take drugs, or to see if they know who the supplier is within the facility. When following terms and conditions of work release or furlough from any jail, they may require a drug test upon leaving as well as arrival to see if anything has changed within the time period that you have been gone, especially for furloughs because they can be extended periods of time. When an inmate leaves, there is a treatment program, or if there is a treatment program in their terms and conditions of release, they have to abide by what their treatment is, and as much testing is ordered for that person. So if they are required one test a week or one test a month, they have to do that, or that is a violation of their probation and parole, and it can go right back to jail. Testing in schools. Why do we test in schools? Schools have been using randomized drug tests as a deterrent for students to stay away from drugs, and that also gives them an out to peer pressure so that they can't be caught at school. And they have also been using drug tests to find early users and hopefully to get them into early treatments. Who is tested? Legally, according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, only student athletes are subject to drug testing because they are part of NCAA rules and regulations. However, when a student has reasonable suspicion about them, they can be asked to take a urine test. The reasonable suspicion has to be observed by a school official, not just word of mouth or another student seeing something. The official has to see direct observation of a substance or physical symptoms of a student being under the influence of drugs or alcohol in some way. Usually, drug tests in school are always random unless those situations where an official has seen the substance, then they are right away, typically. Professional and NCAA testing. NCAA regulations, which are upon athletes, they must sign a form that the NCAA established in 1986, when they established its own drug testing programs. Professional sports use CBAs, or collective bargaining agreements, which is the professional athlete's consent to drug testing. As long as there's no state entity involved, which would be something as a public college under NCAA rules, the Fourth Amendment and Fifth Amendment do not apply to the athletes that aren't in a public college, like a professional sport, because they're in a private organization and they're bound by a contract. And when they sign their contract, they agreed to whatever testing the agency requires for their player. Because the Fourth Amendment protects one from unreasonable searches and seizures, and the Fifth Amendment protects one from being deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, and private property to be taken for public use without just compensation. If these athletes belong to a public organization, they would be giving their property away, and the person may think it's unreasonable. But when you sign a contract, that voids the Fourth and Fifth Amendment because you agree to the terms and conditions already, which would be the private agencies. Each professional sport has its own standard for punishments and treatments, so there's no uniform policy across the professional board, which is NFL, Major League Baseball, women's leagues, and things like that. So if an NFL player was accused of abusing steroids, and they may only have a treatment, and that's all that they would have to do. And then a Major League Baseball player may be doing the same thing, and they may have to do jail time as well as treatment. So there are many conflicts within the professional sports because there is no uniform policy across the board. Okay, the Olympics. Drug testing for the Olympics started in 1988 with the track star Ben Johnson, and they found the illegal use of steroids when they were at the Seoul Games in Korea. The Olympics are most closely monitored because they're a world event, and it's an honor to be participating in the World Games. When they do their testing, they do it a little bit differently, and they do two samples. They have an A sample and a B sample. And A is always processed first, and if there's any indication that there may be an illegal substance in the sample, sample B is then tested and determines if the athlete can compete or not. Okay, welfare testing. For welfare, there are just a few states that are testing for either welfare, food stamps, Medicaid, or unemployment benefits. They are Texas, Arizona, Kansas, Mississippi, Michigan, Maine, Missouri, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Utah, and West Virginia. Research of 2015 has shown that drug testing for welfare has not had too much of a significant impact on the numbers of drug users, and their state spending has gone up to test welfare applicants. Most states found that they had less than 1% test positive of the applicants they ended up testing. There are a few concerning aspects of testing for financial aids. When a person is on drugs but feeling shame to ask for help and they have children, should we turn them away because they are positive for drugs? Or should we give them the assistance because there are children involved and they cannot help their situation? Or should drug testing continue because using drugs is illegal and the drug user is getting government assistance while committing an illegal act and possibly spending all the money on drugs to maintain their habit? There are lots of questions still going into drug testing for welfare and food stamps and government assistance. So whenever we go to do that, we still don't know what the right answer should be. Costs of testing for drug tests actually increase the state's costs because they spent more money on the drug test than they did on giving the person the amount of welfare that they were on, either in food stamps or whatever kind of aid they were getting. Okay, the methodologies, either the most common methods of drug testing, is just urine, which is the most common, and blood. These are both samples, sweat samples, saliva swabs, hair follicle tests, and breath tests. This is just a chart. I wanted to include the duration of detectability of drugs in urine, the drug retention time of which is detectable. So most drugs are amphetamines and methamphetamines, which is only a 48-hour period in a urine test. Cannabis is 3 days, and that's just a single use of it. Another common is cocaine, which is 2 or 3 days. Opiates are only 2 days. And smoking is 21 to 27 days, which is pretty common. And most people, when they smoke, we're talking tobacco smoke, they're going to go ahead and admit that because it is legal. I'll just give you a second to look over that. Okay, and that is my presentation on drug testing. Thank you.